the last Thursday of November, and Patrice Odom had exactly $27 in her checking account. Not $27 and some change. Not almost 30, full $27 and 0 cents. And she'd already checked 3 times that morning because she kept hoping the number would somehow be different. Outside the kitchen window of her apartment in Decatur, Georgia, the sky had gone the color of dirty dishwater. It wasn't cold enough to snow. It never really was in Georgia. But the wind had that mean edge to it that cut right through a jacket. Thanksgiving was in 4 days. Patrice's son Marcus was 9 years old, and he'd been talking about the turkey since October, the way kids do when they've decided something matters. He'd drawn a picture of it at school. A big lopsided bird with a pilgrim hat, and taped it to the refrigerator himself. Patrice looked at that drawing every morning while she waited for the coffee to brew. She was 38 years old, worked the early shift at a dry cleaning shop on Covington Highway, and had been a single mother since Marcus was 2. When his father Kevin left for a woman he'd met at a conference in Charlotte and decided not to come back. Kevin sent child support sometimes. Not reliably, but sometimes. This month he hadn't, and Patrice had already called the one number she had for him and left a voicemail that she kept her voice very even during, because she'd learned that breaking down on voicemail never helped anything. The electric bill had come the week before. $214. She'd paid it because the alternative, telling Marcus to put on another sweater, watching him do homework by flashlight, pretending that was an adventure, wasn't something she could make herself do. Not again. She'd done it once, the winter, Marcus was 4, and she still thought about the way he'd looked at her in the dark, trusting and confused. So the electric bill was paid, and the rent was current, and the account said $27. She needed to get food. Not just any food. Marcus had made a list. She still had it in her purse, folded into a small square. He'd printed it carefully in pencil, the way he did his homework, and underlined the word turkey twice. Patrice drove to the Kroger on Memorial Drive because the prices were a little better there than the one closer to home. She sat in the parking lot for a moment before she got out, doing the math again in her head, the math she'd been doing for 4 days, trying to find a version of it that worked. A small turkey breast was around $12 if she was lucky. Stuffing mix, maybe $3, a can of green beans, rolls if she had anything left. She needed to end up under $27. That was the entire condition. She could do this. She'd done harder things. Inside the store, it smelled like cinnamon and the particular pine-heavy candle scent that grocery stores sprayed this time of year to make people feel festive and spend more money. Patrice took a basket. Not a cart, because carts made it too easy to put things in and forget to take them out, and started at the turkey section. The breast she found was $13.49. She held it for a moment, then put it in the basket anyway. She could make it work. She moved through the aisles carefully, putting things in and taking them out, doing the running total in her head.
Stuffing mix, $2.79.
1 can of cream of mushroom soup because Marcus liked the green bean casserole his grandmother used to make. A small bag of dinner rolls. A single sweet potato, because you couldn't have Thanksgiving without at least one sweet potato, and Marcus would notice if there wasn't one. At the end of aisle 7 she stopped in front of a display of pie. Not full pies, little 4-inch personal pies, the kind that sat in a row near the bakery. Pumpkin, $3.99 each. Marcus had written P at the bottom of his list with 3 question marks, which meant he already knew it was probably not happening, but he was leaving the door open. She picked one up and turned it over in her hands. $3.99. Her total without it was $26.12. With it, $30.11. She stood there a moment longer than she should have. Then she put it back. She told herself it was fine. Kids didn't actually need pie. He would understand. He always understood, which was something she was proud of, and also something that broke her heart, because no 9-year-old should have to understand as much as Marcus did. At the checkout, the lane she chose had a short line. Just one person ahead of her, a tall man in a brown canvas work jacket with his back to her, buying a case of sparkling water and a bag of coffee. He had the look of someone who worked with his hands, broad through the shoulders. A little mud still on his boots despite clearly having tried to clean them. Patrice put her items on the belt. The cashier, a tired-looking teenager with a name tag that said Deja, started scanning. Turkey breast stuffing mix, cream of mushroom, rolls, sweet potato. Deja announced the total, $26.43. Patrice exhaled. She'd done it. She pulled out her debit card. The card reader processed for a moment, then displayed a message she didn't understand at first. Tremashende. She stared at it. She put the card in again. Slowly, as though the problem might have been speed. Trasminiton. Her face went hot. She was aware of the man in the brown jacket slightly to her left now, waiting to put his receipt away, not looking at her but close enough to hear everything. She was aware of the small line forming behind her. She was aware of Deja, who wasn't unkind but wasn't particularly patient either, looking at her the way people look when they're waiting for you to figure something out. "I'm sorry," Patrice said. And her voice came out steady, which surprised her. I'll try something else." She opened her wallet. She had a credit card that she'd stopped using 8 months ago when the balance got to a place she didn't want to look at. She hadn't cut it up because you never knew. She put it in the reader. The machine took longer this time. Trafmetilinged. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. "Ma'am," Deja said. Not meanly. "I need to. I know." Patrice was already reaching into her basket, the familiar sickness of it spreading from her stomach outward. "I know, I just need to take something off." Her hands were shaking slightly as she picked up the rolls. 2.49. "Take these off, please." She ran the card again. She didn't understand it. She'd checked the account. She knew there was $27. She'd looked at it 3 hours ago. "The debit card again," she said quietly. "Can you try it as credit?" Deja tried it. Declined. There was a small sound in line behind her. Not cruel, just involuntary. The sound of someone shifting their weight, someone's day being slightly delayed. Patrice felt it like a physical thing. She reached into the basket and took out the sweet potato. Then the cream of mushroom. She stood there with those 2 items in her hands, not sure how to do the math anymore, not sure if she could feed her son Thanksgiving dinner with what was left. A turkey breast with no sides was just a piece of meat. Marcus had drawn a picture. He'd underlined the word turkey twice. "Let me get that." The voice came from her left. The man in the brown work jacket was still there, and he was looking at her. Not with pity, not with the wide-eyed discomfort of someone who didn't know where to look. Just directly, the way a person looks at another person. He was maybe 45, with close-cut gray at his temples and the kind of face that had been in the sun a lot. He wasn't particularly remarkable. He didn't look like anyone's idea of a savior. He was already handing his card to Deja. "No," Patrice said. The word came out fast, reflexive. "Please don't. I'm fine." "You're not fine," he said simply, without any meanness in it, "and it's Thanksgiving." He nodded at Deja, who took the card. "All of it. Put the rolls back in too." Patrice opened her mouth and then closed it. The sweet potato was still in her hand. "I can't let you do that," she said. "You're not letting me do anything," he said. "I'm just doing it." He said it without drama, the way a person says something that is simply true. The transaction processed and Deja started bagging without asking. Patrice stood there. She felt the tears coming and she forced them back down because she was in a Kroger on Memorial Drive and she was not going to cry in front of strangers. She was not going to be that. "Thank you," she said, when she could say it without her voice doing anything embarrassing. "It's nothing," he said. She noticed he put the rolls back in the bag himself, alongside the cream of mushroom and the sweet potato. Outside in the parking lot, the wind was still doing that mean thing it did in November in Georgia. Patrice loaded her bags into the trunk of her Civic and the man, he'd come out behind her, he was parked 2 spaces down. Put his water and coffee in his truck, a worn blue Ford with a ladder rack on top. "I'm Patrice," she said. He closed his tailgate. "Garrett, you a contractor or something?" she asked, nodding at the ladder rack. "Electrician," he said. "Self-employed. Just picking up a few things before the long weekend." She nodded. There was a silence that wasn't entirely uncomfortable. She was trying to figure out what you said to someone who had just paid for your Thanksgiving dinner in a Kroger parking lot on a gray Thursday afternoon. "I'll pay you back," she said. "I don't know how, but I will." Garrett looked at her for a moment. Not in a way that made her feel examined, just thinking. "You don't have to do that," he said, "but if you want to do something." He reached into his jacket pocket and came out with a card. Not a business card. Exactly. It was a heavier card, cream-colored, with a logo she didn't recognize at the top. He handed it to her. "My buddy runs a non-profit, the Bright Circuit Foundation. They train people for electrical apprenticeships. Office management, admin, scheduling. He's been looking for someone for the operations side for about 2 months. I keep telling him I don't know anybody but..." He paused. "You seem like someone who figures things out." Patrice looked at the card. The nonprofit's name was printed in clean letters. Below it was a name. Derek Ansley, executive director, and a phone number. She looked up. "I work at a dry cleaner." "I know," Garrett said. "That's not what you're going to do forever." He said it the same way he'd said everything else. Like it was just a fact. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Just held the card in both hands. "Call on Monday," he said. "Tell Derek that Garrett Foss sent you." He gave her a short nod and got in his truck. Patrice stood in the parking lot and watched him pull out. The wind moved through the trees at the edge of the lot, sent a few dead leaves skittering across the asphalt. She looked down at the card again. She thought about the electric bill. She thought about Kevin's voicemail that never got returned. She thought about Marcus's drawing of the turkey, the way he'd underlined it twice. The way he already knew at 9 years old to put 3 question marks next to the thing he really wanted. Because hope was something you handled carefully in their house. She put the card in her jacket pocket right up against her chest. Thanksgiving that year was the best one they'd had in a long time. Not because of what was on the table, though the green bean casserole came out perfectly, and Marcus ate 2 rolls and asked for a third, but because of the way the apartment felt. That evening, the kitchen warm and smelling like something good. Marcus setting the table with the serious concentration he brought to important tasks, asking her if he could put on Christmas music even though it wasn't December yet. And Patrice saying yes. After dinner while Marcus was in the bath, she sat at the kitchen table and dialed the number on the card. She knew Derek Ansley wouldn't answer on a holiday. She was just leaving herself a voicemail. A reminder that this was the kind of thing she was going to do now. Monday morning she called. Derek answered on the second ring. The interview was the following Wednesday, in a small office off Flat Shoals Avenue, with mismatched chairs and a whiteboard, covered in scheduling diagrams. Derek Ansley was a tall man, in his early 50s, who talked fast and laughed often, and whose organization had more work than it had people to run it. He offered her the operations coordinator position before she'd finished answering his second question. He told her later that Garrett had called him the Thursday of Thanksgiving week and told him to expect to hear from her that she was someone who figured things out. Patrice started work that second week of December. The salary was more than double what she'd been making at the dry cleaner. There was health insurance. Marcus could get the dental work done that she'd been putting off for 7 months. She cried in her car in the parking lot after her first day, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from relief after a very long time of holding yourself together. She never saw Garrett Foss again. She looked for his truck sometimes, that worn blue Ford, in parking lots around Decatur. She asked Derek once how Garrett was doing, and Derek said fine, still working too hard, still refusing to hire a helper even though his knees were going. The following November, the week before Thanksgiving, Patrice drove to the Kroger on Memorial Drive. She stood in the checkout line and waited, not buying anything herself, just watching. There was a woman in line ahead of her, early 30s maybe, 2 kids with her, a boy and a girl, both in jackets that were just slightly too small. The woman was doing the thing Patrice recognized, the quiet mental math, the items going back, the stillness when the total was announced. Patrice stepped forward. "Let me get that," she said. The woman looked at her the way Patrice imagined she herself had looked at Garrett, in this same store, 1 year ago exactly, startled, ashamed, wanting to refuse. "It's Thanksgiving," Patrice said simply. "It's fine." She paid and didn't wait for thanks, just smiled and walked back to her car. She sat there for a minute in the gray November afternoon, engine running, heat coming up from the vents. She thought about a man with mud on his boots who had handed her a business card and told her something true about herself. She put the car in drive and went home to her son.